Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a first look at an upcoming Tier 8 Soviet premium tank destroyer, the Object Kust. This tank is going to be something brand new, with a brand new mechanic for Soviet tank destroyers that we've not seen before. It's going to be a kind of Swedish TD mashed with a Soviet TD, and we'll see what we mean by that in a second. So, the Object Kust is going to have the Swedish tank destroyer's mechanic of having a siege mode. So what do I mean by that? That means you press a button, you wait 2 seconds, you switch into a mode that will increase your gun handling significantly, but in turn for that, you pay in terms of speed, so you massively reduce your mobility, ability to drive forwards and back, but you are significantly more accurate. So, what does that mean for the Object Kust? Well, this is going to be very Soviet in terms of its alpha, 550, that's pretty Soviet, that's like SU-130 PM levels of alpha damage for Tier 8, that's really quite nice. Penetration-wise, it's very Soviet, 279mm of AP, really nice. 328 gold, that's lovely. That'll be reliable against most Tier 8, Tier 9, and Tier 10 mediums and heavies you'll be facing. However, one thing that is very Soviet with this tank is its long reload time. 17.8 seconds means that every shot you fire, you're going to have to be confident you're going to hit and pen. Otherwise, you will pay significantly in terms of your DPM, because its DPM is kind of loaded within that shot, which is not very Swedish. The Swedish TDs, which have the siege mode, are quick firing, lower alpha. Soviet TDs tend to be higher alpha, slower firing, and we can see that here with the Object Kust. But here we go. This is where we get onto the gun handling and how it's going to be affected by the siege mode. Interestingly, which is going to be slightly different to the Swedish tank destroyers, it looks like this tank can be used outside of the siege mode as well. Whereas for the Swedish tank destroyers, they basically can't shoot unless they're in that siege mode. I mean, they can, but it's very unreliable because the gun is fixed to the hull. However, this tank looks like, to some extent, it is going to be able to play outside of that siege mode. So, its gun handling outside of that siege mode is going to be a 3-second aim time, which is really bad, and dispersion of 0.43. So you can play it outside of that siege mode, but you are going to be basically having to be right in front of your opponent because that aim time is terrible and that gun handling is terrible. However, when you press your whatever key you have bound to switch into your siege mode, your gun handling becomes so much better. You are talking 1.63 seconds aim time, which is absolutely lovely. And 0.32 dispersion is lovely. So that means that this is going to be a really accurate 550 alpha, good penetration gun in siege mode, which is pretty scary. But outside of siege mode, it does look like it's also going to be playable, but not at all anywhere further than right in front of your opponent, particularly. So, it looks like this tank is going to have 5 degrees of gun depression outside of siege mode, adding another 5 degrees inside the siege mode, so 10 degrees inside siege mode, which is pretty nice. It's going to have that gun traverse limit of 3 degrees, so that looks like that's going to apply both inside and outside of siege mode. So that is what is making this tank playable outside of siege mode, in my opinion. I'm yet to see this tank in a game and see whether it can actually play outside of siege mode, but the fact it has a gun traverse limit inside and outside of siege mode, whereas the STRV doesn't, the gun is fixed to the hull, so you have to move the hull to move the gun, means that that's giving me the opinion that it's playable inside and outside, but 3 degrees is not a lot, so you will be having to move the hull a lot to re-aim. But, once again, if you're in that siege mode, your aim time is low, so moving the hull is not a big deal. Outside of it, it is. So its speed outside of siege mode, so its ability to get into position is 50 forwards, 20 reverse. That's really nice. 50 forwards is quick, 20 in reverse is quick. This means that this tank is going to be pretty nippy, pretty high alpha to get into aggressive positions and play them, which is going to be interesting. And then within the siege mode, it has the same issue as the STRVs, 5 forward, 5 back. So you pretty much do have to run a turbo on this tank. Interestingly, its power to weight ratios are also really quite good, so it means you're going to be into position quickly and be able to maintain that speed over most terrains, which is really quite good. You have 1200 hit points, which is not great, but it is a tier 8 tank destroyer, so 1200 is passable. But here's where it gets interesting. This tank has the speed, the mobility, the gun handling, everything to kind of encourage it to play kind of mid to close range. However, its armor does not allow it to. So, 110mm of hull armor. Obviously, we don't quite know what extent that is actually going to look like angled because it's not on tanks.gg yet. So, it's not going to be pretty well angled at all. We can basically say that. But maybe it's going to have some funky ricochet angles. However, it has a giant tumor on top of the tank. Basically a bunker, which is definitely going to be weak. So, yeah. Playing this tank at close range in a brawling scenario, maybe not the best. Interestingly, because it's a TD, we'll actually have a look at its concealment. Its stationary concealment of 17.6 is lovely. Its moving concealment of 10.6 is actually really quite nice as well. So, stationary mobility and its moving mobility means that this tank can do that job as a pretty sneaky sniper. And its view range of 350 is very standard for these kind of tanks, not being able to spot for itself. So, that is something to bear in mind. So, let's compare this tank now to the Tier 8 Premium Swedish Tank Destroyer, the STRV S1, because that is a pretty good comparison between the two. So, we can see here that the STRV is out-trumping the Object Kust massively in terms of DPM. 2,400 compared to 1,850, yeah, big difference. However, we can see that the Kust is massively winning in that 550 alpha, but the issue with the Kust is that all of its DPM is loaded into that one shot. So if you miss that one shot, your DPM is basically third. You basically lose 30% of your DPM. Whereas for the STRV, if you miss 1 or 2 shots, you're not particularly affecting that DPM massively. Dispersion-wise, inside, bear in mind, these are the statistics inside siege mode for both tanks. The STRV is more accurate at 0.29, but it fires more often, so, you know, that makes it slightly stronger. But the Kust of 0.32 is not terrible. That's still really quite nice. It's still really comfortable. But the STRV's gun handling is just better. But lower alpha, better. So its gun is slightly better. So 1.63 aim time compared to 1.34. Mobility-wise, interestingly, they're both identical forward. So this is mobility inside. Sorry, mobility outside of siege mode. I've just got them labeled the wrong way around. So it's mobility outside of siege mode. Forwards for both is 50. However, the trick of the Swedish tank destroyers, they've been able to go almost as quick backwards as they can forwards, is useful. The Kust does not have that. Interestingly, the mobility for the Kust inside of siege mode is 5 forward, 5 back, but the STRV is 8 forward, 8 back. So the STRV is slightly better at that. Gun depression-wise, the Kust is -10 inside siege mode, whereas for the STRV it's -13, so the STRV is slightly better there. However, the Kust is 200 more HP, so it will be able to take at least one more shot a game, which is really quite important for these kind of TDs. View range of 350 meters is identical. Penetration-wise, interestingly, the STRV actually out-trumps the Kust here, despite having a lower alpha gun, but that's a kind of the trick of the Swedish tank destroyers, is having really nice penetration values. But 279 AP is really quite nice, and you will have the overmatch potential as well. And then having heat as gold for the Kust of 320 is also really quite nice when compared to that APCR. You'll see heat doesn't lose its penetration value over range, so heat 320 is lovely, whereas APCR does, so do bear that in mind. That's quite a nice little trick. So, what are my overall opinions on the Object Kust? Well, I'm thinking this tank's looking pretty unique. I think it's a little bit late into the year now that we'll actually see this tank in 2024's Holiday Ops loot boxes. However, I would not be shocked if we don't see this in loot boxes at some point, maybe early to mid 2025. But statistically, I think this tank's looking pretty strong. It's looking pretty good. It's interesting that it's going to be the first Soviet TD with that kind of Swedish siege mode mechanic. And I think with its alpha, it's going to be pretty strong. However, with its long reload time and its poor DPM and its high alpha combined, it does mean missing shots is very punishing in a tank like this. So that will be a difficult thing for lower ability players to understand and get their head around. And therefore, I feel like they will struggle with a tank like this. However, if you're a good player, your aim is good, you know weak points, and you can make the most of every single shot, yeah, this tank will be pretty good. You know, you will be able to make that DPM work. Its gun handling will work for you. You just do have to be careful not to be too aggressive in a tank like this, because its speed will bait you into doing that. But overall, I think this tank is going to be pretty strong, pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. So, do let me know down in the comments what you think about this tank. You know, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Because, you know, I do listen to other people's opinions, unlike some other CCs. No comments. Do check out the video on the screen here and the playlist as well, and do click subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.